we can make the best use, capitalize on technologies, including artificial intelligence and other digital technologies, for the improvement of the livelihood of people. Among our projects, we run the MENA Observatory on Responsible AI, which houses all our work in this area. Very important project that we are very proud of the work that we do with partners in the MENA region is a project titled New Work, looking at new forms of work, inclusion, and in the Middle East and North Africa, with support from Ford Foundation, which we are very grateful for, in partnership with Ford and with regional partners, regional research partners in Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Lebanon, and Jordan. We have run a series of research pieces looking at, with evidence on the ground, on the reality of new forms of work, typically platform-mediated groundwork, the common
I can't hear Dr. Nagra. Is it just me?
No, I think
she's frozen. Dr. Nagra,
Yes.
you're frozen.
I'm just sending her a WhatsApp.
Okay, it's not a problem. So we look at social protection for platform-mediated groundwork, and we also did a study on platform-mediated cloud work. We collaborated with Dr. Ghada specifically to conduct a further study for us, specifically looking at the social protection or lack thereof for platform workers. And this is what we're here to discuss today. Dr. Ghada, you can have the floor.
لا
دكتور غادة you're mute.
خلاص لا أنا كمان جالي ميتنج دلوقتي أستأذنك يعني أنت بعد 4 لا أنا
Maybe you can, Nagam, you can mute everyone else.
أنا كنت عايزة أتكلم معاك لأن أنا فتحته ما فهمتش.
Yes, علياء, can you please do that?
لا ما أنا فاهمة، ما أنا عشان كده عايزة أبص. أنت بعت لي 3 حاجات.
Hello, everyone. It's too bad we missed Nagla. I wanted to thank her for inviting me to join this project, and thank the lovely team who've been quite supportive throughout the process. I was asked to work with the team on issues of extending social protection to platform workers, and this came to me at the right time because this is actually my ongoing research on this topic, extending social protection to employ workers in what we call non-standard work. So I will start by making highlighting 2 common issues that we know. First of all, we have to really acknowledge the power of platform work, what platform work can offer to workers who would be otherwise unable to find job, unable to find work. Throughout this research, I had a chance to talk to so many people. One of the moments I would not forget is talking to a young woman in Sohag, who's actually a university graduate who could not find work in Sohag, and she is doing web-mediated work through one of the platforms, doing translation, and doing website design. And I was like, whoa, in Sohag, you get a chance to do this for a company. We don't know where it is exactly. It was actually a company that was trying to start offices in the Middle East. But the power and the potential for platform work is something that we really need to acknowledge and just be alert to its presence. So it offers flexibility. It offers specifically to those who are under served areas, those who are in areas where there are not that many job opportunities, migrant workers, refugees. So many people can work through platform work. So this is something we really need to acknowledge at the beginning. But we also have to be careful not to over-celebrate platform work. We know that there are so many challenges. First of all, they have no access to social protection. We know that. Sometimes many workers are underemployed not by choice. So you would wait for work to do. This is the first time we hear about AI discrimination, where you're selected to take a job. The platform takes you up on a list, allows you more opportunities than others, or the opposite. Recently there was a global survey of 12,000 workers globally in platform work, and just we know that very few of them had access to pension schemes, and out of all what we call location-based workers, like taxi drivers or similar to what we know in ride-hailing services, only 27% of them had access to insurance injury, and this is global data. We're not talking about a specific country or a specific context. So we know no protection, uncertain income. You could wait for a job, and there could be no jobs with the skill base of the applicant. So this is a global challenge, and we know that this form of non-standard work is here to stay. We know that it's growing. It's not in one context. It's a global phenomenon, and we really worry because when we have workers within that stream, we worry when they have no access to social protection, no access to contributory social insurance schemes. We worry for a number of reasons. The main reason, one reason is, this is a demographic group. There are demographic risks. Once this generation of workers ages, you will end up with a generation of retirees who have no pension schemes, who will have to rely on social assistance. And if these workers are unable to contribute to social insurance funds and social insurance schemes, this also is bad for the sustainability, the financial sustainability of existing social insurance schemes, because most social insurance systems, including that of Egypt, are funded with a scheme called pay as you go. So pay as you go, I pay my contributions, my parents get the pension scheme by the time I retire. So another generation should be paying their contributions, and that should cover my retirement. So it is something that would have serious implications over social insurance funds. And as I said, once they age, they will be a tax burden to these workers will be a tax burden to countries where they work. So Nagla's back. Nagla, did you want to continue the introduction?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Ghada, go ahead. It's fine.
So I started by saying, just the two
principles. Yeah.
I started by saying two principles we have. We're happy that, social, platforms are here. They're creating new jobs, opportunities for people that would not have these opportunities. And we're also very concerned because they have no social protection. They have no access to pension schemes and contributory social insurance system.
So Ghada, you just so you picked up exactly. Thank you so much. That's exactly what I wanted to say, and I'm sorry, my internet just went berserk. My computer. I'm very sorry about that. I was just going to say exactly that we have very high rates of unemployment. So this offers new forms of livelihood, new forms of work. They're welcome. However, the conditions are subpar. So thank you, Ghada, very much. So please carry on. I'm with you. Thank you.
So I'll just zoom in into the issue of access to social insurance, because that's an area that has been fascinating me. And the more I read about it, the more I feel there are so many issues that you always need to look at, and there are so many what we call competing objectives. You want to have a widespread coverage of social insurance, but you want the system, and at the same time, you want to have the right actuarial measures so that the system is not just is covering workers and retirees in a fair way. We don't want, and this is a major issue in the design of social insurance systems, that you don't want a generation to pay to gain at the expense of another generation, or you don't want a generation to pay for other generations. And because this is how social insurance funds usually operate, it's just one generation after the other. So just zooming in, what we have been learning, and this is now we can think of this as a global learning lab. We're all learning this because, non-standard work, platform work has hit us all of a sudden. And now we have to find the measures, the guidelines, we have to find the legal frameworks that would provide protection for these workers. So, we step back and we say, what are the guiding principles? What do we want from social insurance schemes to be able to have them as inclusive as possible of these, what we can call non-standard workers? We want them to be as flexible as possible. And this is not how social insurance systems are designed. Social insurance systems, if you talk to anyone who's part of that industry, you have to have that many number of years. You have to have that minimum income. That there are minimum bounds and maximum bounds of income and insurable wage. So we're seeking a new paradigm in the design of social insurance systems that are flexible, innovative, able to include part-time work, short-term work, and the major thing, the big thing about platform work, the possibility of multiple employers. And this is something that you're trying to square a circle here, because social insurance systems are designed for long-term work, for people working with one employer, and for full-time workers. So non-standard work is basically cutting across all these by making it a challenge that you really have to change the way you're thinking about social insurance systems. And specifically when we focus on platform work, and there's very little research on this, so the thinking is, let's think in two ways. Either we make it mandatory, similar as we think about taxes. And I'll come back with an existing experience with this. If taxes are mandatory, the way we are withholding taxes, we should be holding social insurance contributions so that these workers would have the protection they need. And we would have you don't want a generation of workers that has no protection. That's bad for the whole structure. Another option is leave it as voluntary. Because you would say that, you don't have the system and the structure to make it mandatory, and we leave it as voluntary on a voluntary basis. There is thinking behind that. So we don't want to burden platform companies with paying the share of the workers. So and this is a common problem globally, because countries are competing for FDI. Competing for these platforms to have presence, whether virtually or in or actual presence. So we're seeing globally there is very little reluctance by governments to impose taxes, to impose more than just the basic taxes, the VAT on these companies, in order to be more competitive and open the way. So a voluntary approach to social protection and social insurance would mean you're leaving the workers to their decision, and you're leaving the companies to do whatever they want to do. And the challenge of this is that you will end up voluntary systems. And there's been recent research on this. Whenever you have a voluntary system, you always have very little participation rate, either at the worker side, because people tend to discount the risk of the future because I need the money now. And of course, if it's voluntary, why would any employer or quasi-employer as a platform would want to do this? So two approaches, and before I talk about the mandatory system, which is something that's happening, we're seeing it in some countries. Let me tell you a little bit about the system and the structure of the social insurance system in Egypt. So we've had recent reforms in 2019 where we had one legal framework combining all types of work. And primarily, the majority of those who are covered are in the public sector. We know that. It's actually, and this is not just in Egypt. This is common in the Arab region, to the extent that some reports would say, you just look at the percentage of workers in the public sector, and that's the percentage of people who are covered by social insurance. With the more recent changes, we've seen some addition, specifically after the 2003 labor law. We started to see some, and research has shown that there's been some formalizing of informal workers, opening venues for more workers to join from the formal private sector, but of course none from the informal private sector. So social insurance is voluntary in our system for the self-employed. You would only have access to social insurance as a mandatory, as part of a mandatory way if you are syndicated, if you are an engineer or a doctor, or if you are self-employed in a business that is registered. Other than this, there is no access to social insurance, and you're not required. And it's actually, own account workers are a group least covered in the social insurance system in Egypt. But we know that the taxation system has been much more progressive. The taxation system has been able to reach some of those that are unregistered, including more recently, taxation system has reached those who work online, as bloggers, as people who are doing content. So there's been a more progressive approach to getting people as part of the taxation system, but not so much as part of the social insurance. So I'll talk about the global experience, the experience of Uruguay. The whole world is looking at Uruguay for their introduced a system called monotax. The monotax allows, and actually was started in 2001, and the whole idea is everybody has to pay taxes. There's a saying that you can't avoid two things: taxes and death. So everybody's paying taxes, and with the withholding of taxes, one entity withholds tax and also withhold the contributions to a social insurance scheme. And the monotax started 2001, 2007, they wanted to expand it, so they opened it up to more workers within the self-employed. And to the extent that they also provided more of an incentive, so that the first 3 years you have a discounted rate, you join at a discounted rate, and then it goes up progressively. By 2011, the experience, the monotax experience of Uruguay has significantly reduced the number of people who are working within the informal economy, putting them within the taxation system, and taking on the building on the growth in the taxation system. There's been a growth in access to social insurance. So more and more of these workers are now having access to social insurance. So this is the model we're looking at in terms of a mandatory social insurance system that is attached to taxation. And we go back to platform workers. So what is the role of a platform company? In a mandatory system, a platform would serve as what we can call a quasi-employer. As much as they're withholding the taxes, they will be withholding the social insurance contributions. And that's, I mean, the rate of contributions, it's also something that's debatable because, you know, there is an actuarial there are actuarial measures that should be taken into consideration. And the other aspect to it is that we really have to know how much would the company pay, because if they are employers, they would have to contribute a specific percentage. If they are in a mandatory system, but we're thinking of them as a quasi-employers, and of course we have to remember that they are not the only employer. You could be working with multiple platforms. So who is covering my social insurance, or is it just related to how much money I am making and has nothing to do with a specific percentage or a specific share by the platform, by one platform? Again, some countries and some companies have opted to a voluntary system. So we know about Uber workers in the UK. The company offered them a non-mandatory insurance system, and basically their role has been as catalysts, just incentivizing joining social insurance. In all cases, we need to be cognizant of what we call the policy imperative to have a flexible social insurance system that really allows for non-standard work and appreciates the presence of this group of workers that will continue to grow. And that's far from being a homogeneous group, far from being readily categorized and readily, there are no cookie cutters. We have to understand that. We have to understand that workers are different, and we really have to understand that social insurance systems should be flexible to allow for this level of flexibility. I'll stop here so that I know that there are some people posting questions. So I'd like to engage in a conversation with everyone. And Nagla, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ghada. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for accommodating the challenge of the technology. Before we move to the Q&A, and I thank everyone for, I can see from the chat, and I'm probably going to resort to my team because as I work to help with the Q&A, since I'm working from my phone. But before we go to the audience, if you can just speak to the work that, we are aware as we speak today, the Parliament is discussing the new labor law. And some of us have had access to the draft for feedback and so on. So I wonder, Ghada, if you can just maybe take a few minutes to comment. I do know that when I read the philosophy of the law, there is an incorporation of several of the things that we are hoping to have through the work that you have done, and we've also run through the project. We've had paper by Salma Hussein, who's also our collaborator, on specifically asking for giving recommendations for the law. So do you feel from the conversations that have been happening regarding the labor law, first is, how do you feel about the steps that are being discussed that we are getting to know about informally? And second, what is the relation to other laws? You mentioned the social insurance and others. From what I've seen, I can tell you for sure that I'm happy about some of the additions to the philosophy of the law and to inclusion of platform workers, and that's actually, I'm very proud that I would like to think that we had something to do with it, with the work that we have done with the different stakeholders, I was told. And but also there isn't a clear statement about the role of the technological to keep up with technological change. This is not in the philosophy. The word technology is not in the philosophy. This is something I noticed. But maybe, Ghada, if you take a few minutes just to tell us about the relationship between the labor law, and how do you feel there is a step forward to accommodate what we're talking about, and second, the relationship to other laws like social security and others. And if you can take a few minutes, and then we'll move to the questions from our audience, and I thank them for their patience. Yes, I can see the questions. I'm happy to relate to you the questions of the audience, but please over to you, Ghada.
Thank you, Nagla. Of course, we haven't seen the full, but we're seeing media messages throughout. I think a major issue is that the existing labor law dates back to 2003, and the earlier one was much, much older. And when the labor law of 2003 was out, it was looking at a social insurance law that dated back to 1976. So, I mean, these are lifetimes. There are people in this room probably that are much, much younger than these dates. But so the idea is the law had to change. And I like you, I'm very happy to see that the law is now acknowledging the fact that there are possibilities of multiple employers. There are possibilities of short-term part-time work that is happening. The new norm for many young people now. So I am glad that the philosophy of the law is able to capture this. This is a new law that is coming out, hopefully 2025. So the year 2025 would mean that we have to be really cognizant, of course, that technology is going to play a great role. A lot of talk about what could artificial intelligence do to my job. Would it take my job? Would it take it to a higher level, to a better level? Would it make basic introductory jobs? So these are conversations that labor laws and labor codes should be taking into consideration. As I said, because 2003 law was there, referring to a social insurance system that was based on a 1975 law. So there had to be a lot of changes, not just in the percentages of the contributions, who's contributing what. The other thing that should also be affecting the design of the new labor law is Egypt's introduction of a health insurance, a universal health insurance system. So that's something that should be also taken in the law. And I've seen in some circles there's discussion on this, that the new labor law acknowledges the fact that you have a universal health insurance system. Primarily what I'm very happy with is, and I'm very glad that you were part of this, recognition of non-standard work. 2025 has to acknowledge this.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Or still the full thing.
No, this is great. Thank you so much. And again, we're very grateful to the work of the full team and to the support of Ford for sure. And working with you, of course, and Salma and others. So let me then turn to questions from the audience. I will go in the order of the way I see them on our joint document. So I see a question from Wafa Abdel Ader, our friend Wafa. How do we define platform workers? The situation of own account workers vis-a-vis a quote employment relationship. Also, there's another question from Wafa. How do you see resolution 2180 for 2019 organizing Uber? Would that be a good example? So let's start with that. Ghada, go ahead.
How do we define platform workers? I think this has and how do we define the employment relationship? I mean, we defining them, everybody went to saying, oh, there are web-based services and there are ground-based or similar to transportation based ones. But then how do we define the employment relationship is the big issue. And I think the thinking now is to consider gig workers or platform workers as own account workers. This is the thinking. Different literature I have, but they're not employees. They're not employees, and this is why when we say a mandatory social insurance system, we're still unclear about what would be the percentage covered by them, and whether there's going to be legislation on this. The Uber decision for workers to organize, you always have to know that this is context specific. It really has to do with the with the power of worker organizations, the ability to push for that, and with the power of the economy, because in the end, I think this only happened in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, and it hasn't happened in other contexts. Go ahead, Wafa.
Thank you so much for a very, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Nagla, for inviting me. This is a very good event. But when I meant, I'm sorry, you're muted? No? When I meant the open decision, actually that we have found through, because actually at the ILO now we're supporting a discussion for a new standard, a new setting standard, particularly dedicated for platform workers. So there's a new report that has been issued called the Yellow Report, actually reflecting all the discussions between employers, workers, and also government organization on this issue of platform workers and the rights. And in this report, they have mapped initiatives taken by different countries to organize these groups. So in the report, they have identified a resolution by the Prime Minister, يعني مجلس الوزراء in Egypt. It's resolution 2180. And if you looked at the resolution, it's quite interesting. I myself very skeptical that it actually has been implemented on the ground. But when you read the resolutions, basically it's organized the work particularly of Uber in Egypt. And when you see that the way the resolution has been written, it's written in a way that clearly shows that Uber is a company, and which is responsible for the social security, for the occupational safety and health, and also for all. So it's actually a very interesting resolution to see, which I myself doubt it really has been, implemented on the ground, apart from the taxation system, of course, because it also includes everything related to taxation, training, licensing, and so on. So what I was thinking of, because I'm asking about in your research, because we know, of course, we are in a vacuum. And as Dr. Nagla has mentioned, interestingly, today, the start of the discussions of the draft labor code taking place inside the General Assembly of the Parliament. And in the new draft code, which I have received very recently, there's 5 articles particularly dedicated to, they don't use the term platform workers, what they use the term أنماط العمل الجديدة, a new form of work. In the philosophy, they mentioned the technology, but inside the article itself, I agree with Dr. Nagla, it did not at all refer to but it referred to الأنماط المختلفة, or the different forms of work. And it stipulates that they have all the rights related to other workers who are not working, including the social security and so on and so forth. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen in the General Assembly, but there's 5 articles from Article 95 to 100, particularly related to the new forms of work. My question would be, because the biggest discussion we're having now between the employers and the workers' organizations at the ILO is not about whether the platform workers or the digital platforms should be organized and ensure equal rights with other workers. It's the discussion of the definition, what stipulates a platform worker from an own self-owned worker, يعني عامل لحساب نفسه. In that sense. So this is basically what would distinguish the voluntary, for example, whether there is an obligation from both the employer and the state to ensure social security or not. That's why I took it back to the discussion about the definition. And the importance also is that currently, since there is a current debate taking place between also the government and also the social partner, to rediscuss this whole definition of what really define a digital platform worker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ghada. إذا سمحتي لي, if I may, just for a couple of minutes, make a quick comment. That Uber, what's called Uber Act that you're referring to, I remember when it came in the Garida Rasmi, in the official Gazette, and actually it quoted our research, our very first paper written about the Uber workers in 2017. Now, the issue here is actually, it was criticized, and I actually wrote about this, because it was labeled the Uber Act. So as you say, it was tailored not only to the ride sharing, because then when you talk about platform workers, there are other forms, not only ride sharing, and also tailored to the big companies. Uber is a big company, and the complaint came from smaller companies at the time. So thanks for bringing that up. I don't know, Ghada, if you'd like to comment on Wafa's question. We have thank you. We have a wonderful lineup of questions. So Ghada, if you can address Wafa's question about the definitions, if you have a few, something to add before we move on to other questions.
The one thing I would like to add is what I learned from I'm sorry, my phone rang. People, which is the National Authority of Social Insurance, basically that Uber workers and other ride-hailing services are actually required to report their status at the traffic control authority, and at the same time they're contributing through the traffic control authority. They pay carta. They pay a specific carta. That carta goes into the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Ghada, it was cut. Are you, I'm sorry, did you make your comment? I sort of lost you. Yes?
Yes, I did. I was just referring.
Sorry.
Dr. Nagla, I'm happy to moderate the Q&A from my end. I'm unable to turn my camera on.
La, it's fine. Nagham, I'm okay. I see the document.
Okay.
Sorry, we're just miraculously working with the technology. It's working. Thank you. So I have a suggestion. I have a lot of questions. So I'm going to, Ghada, I'm going to sort of give you snippets of like a couple of questions to address 2 at a time, if that's okay. All right. So there is a question about, there is a comment from Dr. Dina Abdel Fattah. I'm going to try and pick up the few comments and maybe you can comment on that. One of them relates to migration. So she says, Dina says, it's not a question as much as adding another dimension, which is additional insight. Digital migration is starting to pick up. GCC is hiring remotely now as a way to cope with their own regulations. EU is moving towards digital migration. So the comment here is how young people who initially struggled with physical migration are digitally migrating with no access to social insurance. Programs in countries of destination with a voluntary system in Egypt, we are going to see more and more people outside the social insurance system. Unlike the aging societies in the EU, this model will add a social insurance problems in the near future. This is one for you, Ghada. Allow me to give you 2 points to comment on. This is one. And the second, I have a question from Anas Ghunaim. Government ownership is one of the cornerstones of social production. There are examples of successful application of micro-insurance, such as India's Self-Employment Women's Association, SIWA. So the question is, could micro-insurance be a potential solution for the inclusion of gig economy workers in informal social protection? What would be a realistic pathway? So one of them, the question is about digital migrants, and another one is, and gig work, and the other one is related to the micro-insurance, for example, public-private partnerships or direct implementation through NGOs. So, Ghada, is that too much to handle, or just these are
No.
that you can comment on, and then we move on?
2 beautiful questions.
Yes.
Dina, thank you. Yes, I mean, we think that this is going to be, who knows, there could be more migrant workers, virtual migrant workers. I agree with you that that's actually a new potential. And that woman I interviewed in Sohag is working for a company we don't know where through one of the platforms. So absolutely, you're absolutely correct. Micro insurance, this has been a puzzle to me. There is a growing industry of microinsurance in Africa, and the Middle East and North Africa region has the lowest share of microinsurance services. Of course, when we were kids, we know Masr al-Ta'min and Shar al-Ta'min, we know these companies, and these belong to the microinsurance stream, but the level of penetration, the level of outreach is very the level of penetration and level of outreach is very limited. So, I mean, the one thing we know about microinsurance is that this is all going to be provided by the private sector. So you need to have the right mechanism within the government to make sure that these private providers of insurance are actually being monitored, are providing. I'm sorry, my phone keeps ringing. they are actually being monitored, and that they are providing the service at fair conditions, you know. And there's been recently this incident of the assault and the killing of actually a major CEO of an insurance company, and the whole movement of the 3 days, the deny, delay, and I remember the third D. So you don't want that. You really want a social an insurance system that is being monitored and managed well.
Okay, so let me then move on. I have a couple of questions. I have from Asma, our partner from Tunisia, Asma bin Hassan. She is asking about labor laws are about professional relationships. So are the platform workers considered as employees? That's one question. And a related question from Irene Silwanes, our friend also. The question for the new labor law, whether and how platform workers are identified. Are they considered own account workers or contract dependent where an employer is liable? So again, about definitions, you know, are the workers employees, dependent, on account? So Ghada, over to you.
Well, all the literature I've been reviewing, I think the thinking has been to consider them as on account workers. And with that, you're able to work with multiple platforms at the same time. You can be driving your vehicle for Uber and Didi at the same time. It's really up to you. You could be doing translation for Fiverr or for Khamsat or for any other platform. So the thinking in most of in all the articles I've been reading is that we consider them as own account workers. As professionals, they're non-syndicated own account workers, because Irene and I worked on this, and we know that for own account workers, you can have social insurance through your syndicate as a doctor or as an engineer, and through business formalization. They don't have business formalization, but they're own account workers. That's the thinking I've been seeing in the literature.
Thank you, Ghada. We have a wonderful follow-up from Asma from Tunisia, and I'll read it. The Tunisian experience in extending social protection to platform workers was through the new self-entrepreneur law that provides a new legal framework to informal workers to formalize their activities and access to social protection, including ground and cloud workers. Thank you, Asma. This is very useful. So yeah, Ghada, you agree? I mean, this is good, you know, very good precedent for us. So I have more for you, Ghada, from Elliot Palot. He asks, should Egypt adopt a mandatory social insurance system? And if so, how can they account for being deemed as less competitive by platforms?
This is the perennial question. Impose all you want, and then they will run away from you. That's the thing. But we've applied taxes. We've been successful in imposing taxes. So if you're imposing taxes, impose social insurance system, but let's sit and have a good conversation about the share of the platforms, because what they have to pay, because that's the real deal. They can do the paperwork of as much as they do the paperwork for filling your taxes, as for filling my taxes as a platform worker, they can also fill my social insurance as a platform worker. But the issue is, who is going to pay the share of the employer? That is the deal. That is the main issue. If you impose on them the share of the employer, they're going to compare sites, and AI will put you, if you're in Egypt with a high social insurance fee, social insurance cost, will put you late on the list. That's specifically for cloud work, not for ground work. But yeah, definitely, that is the real question. On Asma's point, we're very happy to see the experience of Tunisia, and we're very happy to see the experience also of Morocco, and we've been following on that. They follow the French system of the Lotto entrepreneur, where basically I will just go online, register myself as self-employed, go work in whatever platforms, and I would have the ability to issue receipts. I'll have the ability to be a formal self-employed person, whether you can work on platforms or on non-platforms.
Yeah, but you know, also, Ghada, I was thinking as you speak, because what you mentioned very quite rightly about answering the question about the mandatory social insurance, this is a tension that happens always. The same thing happens when we discuss the AI regulation. I mean, there's always this tension between if you regulate, then companies are going to run away. But it is if you adopt a little bit of a wider lens. I mean, if you want to do the mandatory system, maybe you can give the companies incentives through other venues. It doesn't have to be you can make it up. You can take a balanced approach, because if governance is needed and if regulation is needed, then it has to be done. There can be creative ways, as you mentioned, thinking of alternatives in a way that actually achieves what is required. We don't have to stick to the narrow, if you tax them. I hear you. I mean, that's the argument that always said, and on levels, by the way, and always between Europe and the US. In US wants to incentivize, but then Europe wants to regulate, and then businesses will run away. But then maybe you can regulate and at the same time offer incentives in a different way. So I'm thinking aloud with you, because what you said is absolutely right. Once you start, people think that you're going to have a mandatory system. There is always the fear that companies will run away, but they don't have to. So yeah, I do have also from my colleague, Dr. Mona Saeed, a comment that I'm going to read. She writes, unfortunately, the gains, and it's quoted from the team is quoting the chat in a doc. So I'm reading the doc, not the chat. Unfortunately, the gains of increase of coverage of social insurance in Egypt, as new social insurance law reduced rates a bit and had better enforcement, are now under threats, because with the increase in the minimum wage from 3,500 to 6,000 to 7,000 starting March, it will increase the minimum insurable wage, and hence likely to induce more informalization by private sector firms in general. That is, hire workers without contract. And is this the right environment to ask platforms to pay social insurance? How else can they be incentivized? Can it be related to tax incentives or reducing costs in any other way? So Mona, as if you heard me. So Ghada, what do you think?
Mona, lovely question. Always lovely to see you and engage with your thinking. Irene and I looked at the data, and we are seeing it's not just the minimum wage that has been increasing, but also the insurable wage, the minimum insurable wage, which is usually much lower than the minimum wage. So the minimum insurable wage has been increasing, and with that, we are seeing a decrease in contributions and a decrease in access to social insurance systems.
Yeah.
So it's not something we can take lightly. Your question is spot on. We cannot take this lightly. Make it more expensive, and people will find ways to evade. You're just pushing people to evade when it becomes too expensive. And at the same time, people who are making it more expensive are saying, but well, the system is not sustainable financially. And we're talking about increasing the minimum wage, the minimum insurable wage. You talk to people who are part of this, and they tell you we need to ensure the sustainability of the fund. The argument we're making is if you make it more affordable, more people will join, and in the end, the cost will go down. So we're making it. So it's either you go on a positive on a positive cycle, or you go on a spiral where you make it more expensive, so less people are joining and more people are avoiding it. But your question is spot on, Mona.
Nagla, if I may add, just
Yeah,
thank you
of
for your
course.
answer. Just a follow-up, really, thinking aloud. And it's a question to you also, Nagla, because you probably know more also about this. So how do you approach platforms about this? I mean, are they supposed to report a certain average wage? How do we calculate the insurable wage? Because it is not hourly. I mean, nowadays, by the way, for the first time now, Egypt, because I serve on the National Council of Wages. For the first time now, Egypt has a minimum hourly wage, which is 28 pounds an hour, again, effective in March. So is that going to be like the hourly, do they calculate an hourly wage? How do you really get an insurable wage? I think this is like an important technical question.
Well, I mean, what we've done, I can tell you about what we did in our work. When we did the fair work studies over 2 years for Egypt, and the team, we asked the workers, and we don't ask the platforms about the pay, we ask the workers, and the workers tell us how much they make, and and of course, every experience is different. So we cannot say there is a wage by Uber. You cannot say that, but you ask the workers how much they make, and then you compare it to the living wage and the minimum wage. But given the nature of the work, we cannot really say Uber's wage is XYZ. But I think the challenging part here is that again, with the workers, it is because the type of it's sometimes part-time, sometimes full-time. Many of them actually do this full-time to earn a living. It is very hard to actually say there is an actual, you end up knowing how much they make. This is the best that you can reach. To find out what is an insurable wage, I really have no idea how you can do that given the nature of the work. But Ghada, I mean, I'm happy to hear what you think.
I don't think there's ever going to be a minimum wage for platform work. For what reason? The reason is I want to be competitive. So I am offering my service, and I'm always thinking of cloud work. And
Yes.
even if with groundwork, I am offering a service at a lower price to be competitive. So I'm ready to translate that page at a cost. I mean, usually they don't translate now. They evaluate the translation done by AI. That's what I've seen the cloud workers doing. So I'm ready to do it for £10 because I want to compete with you who said you are going to do it for £12. So if you put a minimum wage, these are people who are offering their service on the platform. They want to be competitive. So the regulation of minimum wage does not apply because it's basically me. I am lowering my time, the cost of my time to do this service because I want to be competitive. And you could just jump in and go for a lower bid to take the job, maybe because it offers more hours. So we can't work a minimum wage within this formula. Now, the minimum insurable wage is only designed for people working full-time.
How's that?
And this is how it is. It's part of the bylaws of the social insurance law. And it's based on full-time work. And that's why we're saying we need social insurance systems that are capable of understanding and dealing with the fact that a worker can have multiple employers at the same time and can be working part-time and short-term.
So this is really an open question, isn't it?
Yes,
because as Nagla said, there are many of them who work full-time. Therefore, in principle, the minimum wage should apply at the monthly minimum wage. For those who work part-time, now the hourly wage should apply by law. But I think Iran had her hand up. Maybe she wanted to join.
Let me. Oh, sorry. I wanted actually to invite Iran's question. If I may, Iran, I'll invite you comment. But I see a very interesting conversation between Iran and Asma. So before I ask you to contribute, Iran, you have. I would like you also to comment on this because Iran, Asma asks, could the Tunisian experience be duplicated in Egypt? And Iran comments on Asma's comment. Have there been changes in coverage since the new law? I would be interested if there have been any studies regarding this new legal framework. Asma is our research partner actually in the project that we are working on with support from Ford. So Iran, would you like to, do you have an addition to make and maybe make your question also to Asma? Go ahead.
No, I am very, it's very good to know that Asma is working with you, and I would love to see the study. And because Egypt has adopted a new firms law, the new micro, small, medium enterprises, and it has also a component to facilitate formalization for the small and micro firms, which is basically micro firms is basically a kind of self-employment, So I would be interested to know the Tunisian experience and to learn from all this fabulous work. Now, I had one intervention about the question of MENA on the minimum insurable wage. So I was just in a meeting with the National Organization of Social Insurance in Egypt, and actually the minimum insurable wage is applied even for irregular workers. It is not a minimum wage. It is a minimum insurable wage upon which the contribution is calculated. And they calculated, and he told me even the contribution amount that they have to pay is 9% of the 2,300. So it's a 207 Egyptian pound per month. And to market it, they say you just pay £7 a day, and that's it. So the minimum insurable wage is applied for everyone contributing to the social insurance scheme, whether irregular workers, own account workers, employees. Everyone is bound to the minimum insurable wage. Now, employees in the private formal sector have been treated differently. Because they are in the formal sector, they have to follow the minimum wage regulation, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when there is this conflict or this tension between the minimum insurable wage and the minimum wage, which wage we should be applied. So what I hear is that from NOSI even, they say for the private sector, for the formal private sector, we should think about a minimum. The minimum insurable wage is basically the minimum wage because they have to pay the minimum wage because the minimum wage is higher than the minimum insurable wage. At that time, it was 3,500 when the minimum insurable wage was set at 2,300 or 2,000, right? So they take the minimum wage as the minimum insurable wage in formal private firms. Otherwise, they take the minimum insurable wage even for irregular workers. Now, the question for platform workers, because they are working with platforms and multiple employer, I think the minimum wage is not it's not legal, it's not applied in Egypt, like because of the informal sector, it's applied legally, right? And on the formal private firms, but any informal firm wouldn't apply the minimum wage, right? So a platform worker who is working at a international firm or a platform worker, there is no binding, there isn't any binding constraint on the company to pay them the minimum wage. In addition to that competition thing,
but they will be breaking the law, though.
Okay,
I mean, the government doesn't accept informality, right?
Okay,
What is the penalty if a firm doesn't pay the minimum wage? That's a question. I hear many things. So if there is no penalty on a law, it's not binding.
Okay, can I okay, thank you so much, Erin. This is amazing. So if I want to go back to Ghada, and I'm very happy that we're making these conversations amongst each other and to connect, each other. Can I go back to Ghada, because I have to comment on this conversation, but also I have Radwa Abu Shadi mentioned China, Singapore, Indonesia, and also Asma was asking about the Tunisian experience. So maybe Ghada, from your expertise, you can tell us a bit more about how much can we take from the experience of other countries, and maybe just if you have also comments, because I see, it's super interesting, but we are sort of approaching the end of the hour. So I'll pass it on to Ghada to make her comments on those points. Ghada, over to you.
Thank you, Nagla. I'm fascinated by the conversation. Yeah. And thank you to everyone who's chipping in. And please bring us back again, Nagla, because apparently we enjoy the conversation.
Yes. So this is the beginning. Thank you for that. That's amazing. We'll definitely. So if we can pick up on everything, we will pick up on the next one for sure. But over to you, Ghada. What do you think about
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we have to learn from every possible experience. The research I cited looking at the difference between mandatory and voluntary, the outcome of mandatory and voluntary schemes was specifically looking at China, because China has platform workers, platform companies that actually applied the mandatory systems and others that did not apply a mandatory system for social insurance. And the research just published early, I think early this year or late in 2024, is just saying that when you have it mandatory, you have more workers joining. It goes without saying, if it's not mandatory, everybody procrastinates joining or avoids it. We're looking at the experience of Tunisia and Morocco all the time. We're looking at and we see that, you know, new legislations, what happened in 2019 when there were changes to the framework for social insurance, we see that this was actually listening to the experience of other countries, because before then we had 4 separate laws. And the major challenge has been the portability between the different schemes. If you are in a certain employment status, because each law was basically regulating social insurance for a specific for people in a specific work group, whether specific employment status, whether you are a wage worker or a self-employed or an informal employment or in informal employment, or workers outside Egypt or migrant workers. So we definitely are learning from other experiences. And Radwa, thank you for bringing that. You and I should have coffee. Come back to campus. Radwa is our alum. Come back to campus.
Yes, I know. I recognize the name. Yes, of course.
Come back and let's talk about what you had in mind, and we discuss. We have a conversation about that.
Well, thanks, Ghada. I mean, also the thing is, our project is regional. So when we were at the stage of compiling the papers and looking at the issues are so similar. You know, we have our ASMA in Tunisia, we have our partners in Morocco, the Solidarity Center, we have partners in Jordan and in Lebanon, and it's incredible how much similarity we have. So we know that we have similar issues, and we definitely have to learn from the experience of each other on regulating what's going on. There is a last one I want to, there was a question from a comment from Nawal Tariq earlier about organization, unionization. Is this something that you see, you know, if you can just speak to this in a couple of minutes before we wrap up, Ghada. Yani, do you see, and just unionization or even organization in general, through unions or through informal, because we did have one of our round tables, there was a suggestion, we had the workers around the table with different stakeholders, and the suggestion was to create an entity. A union is usually done for, and you guys can correct me, Ghada, you can correct me, is done for MENA, for certain profession, whereas with gig workers, they work in different, they're not just drivers, they can be domestic workers and others. So what do you think, how can there be a voice of the workers if we take this from a broad perspective, not necessarily a union? What do you think?
Well, globally, workers on platforms have been unable to organize. I mean, we know about what happened with Amazon workers as at one level, but globally, workers on platform workers, by the nature of where they are and how they operate, it's organization. This is not the time and era where we see some strides happening or some gains on organization. It's just it's for anyone who's interested in this, we are not seeing we're not seeing some good news on organization when it comes to that, specifically when it comes to platform workers.
Latin America did some stuff in that direction, no?
Not that I know of. I mean, you probably know more about that. But we can see, and there's something else we have to really acknowledge, because it's the power of social media and the power of reviews.
Yes.
So it's maybe it's a whole new game where it used to be you're upset, you go to your union. Now you're upset, you go to social media and you galvanize anger against a specific platform company that has not been dealing fairly with its workers. And we see this happening a lot, that, you know, the workers of any specific company going out. So maybe we're going to see, we're now in an era of virtual platforms and virtual work. Maybe we get to the era of virtual organization.
Yeah, but to your point, actually, one of the things when we did the fair work research, the fair representation, we broadened the definition to not only include unions. As you say, there was a platform that had a very strong social media Facebook group where workers could actually voice, and they did get the point. They did get the point, the successful point the scoring, because they offered space for, workers to present their views in social media, and they got responses from the company. So to your point, that's what I meant by different ways of representation and organization, not only through a union. We are running out of time, and this is a brilliant discussion. So I guess that leaves us with the decision to do more, to speak more and get together more. And really, what remains for me is to thank Dr. Ghada Barsoum for a most wonderful presentation. Your great contribution in the paper that you wrote for us is really insightful. And the promise that this should, there should be more. So it's only the beginning of conversations like that, and a continuation of work that we have been doing over the last couple of years. So I really want to thank you all very much. Thank Dr. Ghada Barsoum in particular for her time, and thank everyone who participated. This is a conversation among friends. I also thank you for your patience with the challenge of the technology. My home internet decided to break down all of a sudden, but we managed. And I thank my team for Nagam for chipping in, and everyone from the team to help with the questions. And I apologize to anyone whose comments or questions we were not able to address given the time, but certainly the conversation will continue. And I wish you all the best. And Ghada, again, thank you so very much. And thanks to Ford for their support for our work. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you,
Thank you, Nagla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Very much.
Everybody.
Please
Bye.
look out for the observatory. We'll be looking at, we'll be putting up on the observatory, MENA observatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Nagla.
Bye-bye.
Perfect as always.
Thank you.